Tampa Bay Spirits presents Haunted Campfire Tales Live. Welcome. Gather around the fire. Get comfortable, but not too comfortable. The true ghost tales are about to unfold. Ta-da!
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, I'm Rob.
I'm Joan.
Hi, I'm Beth.
I'm Les.
I'm Jess.
I'm Joy.
Robin.
And we're the Tampa Bay Spirits. Welcome
Or part
aboard,
of us.
everybody.
Yes. Not all.
Well,
I think
Robin
we're
and
all,
Joy are.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I mean, I'll take that. There's others that aren't online tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, this isn't the entire team.
Oh, no.
Not the entire
Those that,
It's the only part that does anything.
there you go.
Oops.
Did I say that out loud? Marjorie Deering says
Hi,
hi.
Marjorie.
And Paul Hollis says hello.
Hello,
Fellow
Paul.
spookies. Hello, Paul. So glad that you're here. I don't know if you heard, but Joe Congel's daughter's mother-in-law passed away unexpectedly while we were doing the show last night. So he won't be joining us tonight.
And George is traveling, so we've got a couple of people
George
that
is
are
traveling.
normally with us. that
But
won't be.
I'm sure, Paul, that you know that George is traveling.
Yes, I'm sure he does too.
Sweet George, we love him so much. So how is everyone doing?
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, us. I wasn't sure. It's been a while. Very good. After 2 private investigations this weekend,
Yes.
we were very, very busy. So we were enjoying some rest on Sunday and diving into some evidence review very soon.
Yeah, we haven't started on evidence review yet.
We needed a day of rest.
I'm really excited to see what we got from Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be amazed to see what we got from Friday night.
Should be interesting.
Could be.
It's already been interesting.
It
Yeah.
has. But anyway, we're exhausted because Friday night we didn't leave. We didn't start breaking down until 12:30 at night.
Yeah.
And then we went out again Saturday night.
It was a shorter night, but
Oh, it was a shorter night, but it was really a
Yeah.
wonderful night.
That was a wonderful night.
Was really amazing. We were able to speak with the dead mom of the husband and the daughter and she had died unexpectedly very young, and it's really sad, but she showed up, didn't she?
She sure did.
Big time.
Yeah. It was really awesome.
It was very touching.
Mhm.
Very emotional.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was not a dry eye in the house, and that's for sure.
so our next investigation is what, on the 18th, right?
18.
November.
That's here in Brookville, Florida, at
May
May
Stringer.
Stringer.
May Stringer House. Yep.
Yeah. So that should be interesting.
We
No,
don't
it
want to
is.
give too much away because Jessie wants to see what she can
Yes.
hear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know I already said one thing. I'm not going to say anything else.
I was laughing about the only thing I picked up on the first
Oh,
investigation.
yeah. Tell them that. Tell them that.
Oh, well, mom was asking me beforehand, checking in, like, how, are you picking up anything? And I was like, no. And the whole car ride there, I was thinking, well, I did have this moment, but I thought, even when you're doing this stuff all the time, you kind of second guess yourself and you think I'm just like, it's just me thinking about stuff or daydreaming or whatever, I don't know why I'd be daydreaming this, but while I was working, I just had an image of me saying to the homeowner who I'd never met or anything, or talked to. And I just had an image of me saying to her, no, like, I don't think you're crazy. Like, you're not crazy. I believe you. That's it. That's my thing. And I really wish I had, and the whole way there, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should mention that. And I was like, nah, that's probably nothing. Now I know to mention it, because when we got there, we were told, I'm not crazy. Like, I mean,
Several times.
many
Several
That was,
times.
100 times.
that was one of the first things she said when we walked in
I'm
the
not
door.
crazy.
she said to me was, I'm not crazy. And I was like, I know, like, I believe you. But it was so funny because I didn't think it was anything. And then, of course, I couldn't believe it because it was big, I'm not crazy energy coming at us the whole night, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Please believe me, I'm not crazy. So,
She's not
Yeah.
crazy, but she's calling me on Monday trying to figure out where her bras are. See if
Seeing if Jess, Beth, or I knew where her bras were, if we could
we could pick up on that.
pick up on where they were. We were like, nope.
That's not really what we do, but
She's not crazy.
it just goes to show you, you know, sometimes you will. It's like I said before, if you have somebody that you can tell those things, now I know, like, next time we go on an investigation, no matter what, if something pops into my head that I don't know, you know, what it's about, to just let them know, because that would have been
Yeah, put it out
cool, you know, and we would have had a funny moment during the investigation where we would have looked at each other and gone, aha, you know. And it's just nice to, like, get the confirmation up on stuff. So
Yeah. Well,
But
and I
I'm
think
Go ahead.
that we helped her too.
Yes, I
certain
do
degree.
too.
I think we
Yeah.
did.
I do too. I think we were a big help to her, and I'm glad that we were able to help her.
She told me on the same phone call on Monday morning that it was much quieter and everything.
Oh,
She says
wow.
they're still here. I know they're still here, but they're
Mhm.
much quieter and there's not as much interaction between everybody.
Right.
well, I'm glad, because for that particular homeowner, that was a concern of hers.
Yes.
Was she was worried that when we left, it was going to blow up, and we let anything there know that was not what
Right.
was going to be happening.
That's right.
That was not acceptable behavior when we left.
Yeah.
So
And that's what I told her. I said, well, you know, you're learning more how to deal with them and how to talk to them. And I said, because she said, what you guys did really helped. I said, well, we didn't do a whole lot, because basically she wouldn't let us. But she said the crystals really helped.
oh, good.
Yeah.
That's
So-
good.
Well,
So there was
you know-
more than one?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And we were the third team in.
Wow.
There had been people in before us, and we felt from the beginning, from when we first got the first call, we all felt that we were supposed to help her learn how to deal with this herself. We were to enable her and teach her how to deal with that and not allow the kind of chaos in that was there, and to help her not to be fearful.
We were able to determine that she had crazy EMF coming out of her circuit
Electrical
box.
box.
That
The
was
electric panel.
inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like inside the home, right near an area where she was feeling very uncomfortable, and
It was
that
extreme.
can really.
Yeah,
Some people are really
yeah.
sensitive to that, and it was off the charts. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
less.
Our gauges wouldn't even measure it.
No, that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
It was at health danger
Yes,
or health
Yes.
risk.
health
level.
risk,
Yeah.
definitely.
So we were
told
able
her
to
call
tell
in
her-
to a nutrition and get that fixed, and that would bring her level of fear down quite a bit. Just
Yeah.
getting that fixed.
Because when there's high levels of EMF pumping out, it can make people feel uncomfortable, like disease, like they're not at ease, uneasy. They can feel like they're being watched. They can
Mhm.
even sometimes see things that aren't
Yes.
there, see
They
things
can
happening. And
hallucinate. Yeah.
High
I mean, it's
levels of
not
anxiety for sure.
Mhm.
anxiety, anxious. So, and that's a very real phenomenon still happening, but it has
Yes.
a practical, real world application where we can say, hey, you can do this step and that will help that and help you feel comfortable in your house, you know?
And in this
So-
case, things were really happening to her in her mind. They were happening, for sure were happening to her.
Yes.
Maybe if that electrical box gets fixed, all that'll reduce and she won't have as
Yeah.
At
any
least
problem.
that
She may not have any
anxiety.
problem at that point.
Yeah.
You're
That
right.
anxiety and that feeling of unease and everything, you know,
Yeah.
that goes
Yeah,
along
and
with
normally, most places we go, the baseline will be 0.2 to 0.5, somewhere in there. And the last numbers I seen before it maxed out was 96.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it
wow.
maxed out. We couldn't even read it. We don't know what it was.
No. We didn't have the right kind of
Yes.
equipment to read that high.
No.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. It can cause nausea. It can even, cause, problems with your brain. So yeah, you need to get it
Yeah.
fixed. I think the number one thing I think that all of us on the team would really like for people to know is to not be fearful.
Right.
Yeah.
Fearful feeds certain type of energy, and it's a negative type of energy. And you really don't want to hand over your power to those things. So, and she was very fearful. So hopefully we hoped with that. And Beth had some crystals, which she continued to think was glass instead of gemstones, but that's okay.
Shiny.
And that has really helped her because of Beth had her place them in the 4 different corners of the house. Right, Beth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And also helping her to learn that she didn't. I think when people told her before to tell them to leave, if you don't want the spirits in your home, tell them to leave. And she was shouting at them to the point where neighbors could hear. And just kind of discussing with her a little bit about say it firmly, but you don't have to yell. You don't have to project your voice on speakers or anything. Just say it firmly. This is your space. And I think when homeowners do learn to do that, they can recover from any kind of fearful activity very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Joy did that in her house, didn't you, Joy?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like the exact same thing. I mean, no one had to teach her to do that, but that's what she did.
Yeah.
Just talked to them and told them where the other people had moved to and said, come on, and they did.
Go on.
We'll find them.
And I'll call you an Uber.
Yeah, at one point early, we told her. I think it was Chris told her that we think it's her husband that was there, and she just looked at us and she said, "Oh no, he got to go. We didn't get along. He can get out of here." So she's ready to poke him out.
Right.
But by the end, she wanted him to stay.
Yeah.
And by the end, she kept telling us that she really loved him. And
Yeah.
Oh,
Which was really nice.
mm,
yeah.
she
We
was,
discussed a lot that the strife and the arguments and the disagreements that you have here on earth, once you pass over, it's all love. And that stuff doesn't matter at all. Here, it doesn't matter either if we can get past that and beyond that. But once we pass, it's all love. And he wouldn't be there watching out for her if he didn't love her, care for her. I think that helped her too. I hope
yeah,
so.
I do too. No, it did. I know it did. Yeah. So really, it was good.
Yeah.
So it was ghost investigations and a little counseling with both nights.
Quite the combination.
With
yeah.
both nights. Yeah.
both nights.
But that's why we do this, really, is to bring peace to the living and to the dead. That's why we do it.
Mhm.
I love home investigations the best.
Yeah.
I love going to hotels and, famously haunted places. That's fun. That's my idea of a fun night. But doing a home investigation with people who need help is,
Rewarding.
what we live for as a team. It's why we do this.
So tonight's topic.
Yeah.
Hey.
All right.
Tonight we're gathered together to discuss time slip versus residual haunting. A lot of people probably don't realize what a time slip is. Jesse, I think you've done some deep dive stuff, right? Again?
Yeah. I mean, as much as you can on this topic. And I was going to say, I was curious because Robin, I think this was your idea, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So what was there? Is there something that happened that made you curious on this topic, or was it just talking about?
Well, actually, there have been times where I have seen things and I didn't feel like I was seeing a spirit. I physically felt like I was getting a glimpse into the past.
Okay.
And I always, I watch different shows on TV and they talk about residual haunting. I'm like, why is it necessarily that? Why isn't it just you seeing a repeat of something from the past?
Mm-hmm.
And I did do a little, I looked up really quickly because I thought I don't want to sound like a total moron. And the first few things I found out for time slip was a plot. Can't even think of the word, but when you're writing a book, people use that to move plots along. But then I found a very interesting article, which you probably did too, in Psychology Today. Did you see that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, it went on about how time is supposed to work and all this scientific language there. Like, I don't need to know that. I have no idea. I'm not worried about, multiverse and, all the theories about, and I mean, I've always figured, because that's what they always said, that time was linear, but that still didn't stop me from, except for that article, that it's not linear. It's like, I can't even contemplate it, but I always felt like I could see things in the past, that I could get glimpses of things, even like, I think we talked about it before, from antique furniture.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I was getting a glimpse of something attached to it, but more of the life it had in another time and witnessing bits of that. So that's why I thought time slip versus residual haunting might be a good thing to talk about, even though I don't really know anything.
Has anyone on the panel here ever experienced any time loss?
Not that I'm aware.
Dad, are you asking yourself or?
Am I asking myself?
I know
You have a story?
time.
Well, sort of.
I mean, you don't have to share the story, but I haven't had any lost time or anything like that. How about anyone else?
No.
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
I was just wondering.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. Like in the last 2 minutes, maybe I just lost that.
Paul
Paul
Hollis
says
says
time loss after 4 Guinnesses.
that's terrible.
In that article that I was reading, they were talking about a case that was documented, not because they could prove it, but where there were 3 men who were working. I can't remember. I don't know if they said it was the 1930 years ago, because I had a time loss. I can't remember because I read it an hour ago. But they were working and they saw where they were picking things up. They were moving them, and they saw a house, a white house, and they were all very clear about what they had seen. And then they went back to work the next day, and the house wasn't there, and there was no sign that it had ever been there in the recent past. And so that was, to me, that's where you got a glimpse, because I don't know if you can see the future. I mean, we can get premonitions, but I don't know that you can see. So we're just going to talk about the past, because just going to start like to blow my mind if we go any further.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because when I was looking into this, it was bringing me to like time travel more when I was looking at it from
Right.
that perspective, right? And so, yeah, you can go down a real wormhole, no pun intended, but it's a lot of info, and like you said, you can get really in the weeds really quickly with all the language they're using. But basically, like, a lot of scientists and physicists are trying to prove that time travel could be possible. But I found this really interesting. Like Albert Einstein, he believed that it may be possible to time travel once we can figure out how to move at the speed of light, but
Right.
that it would only be forward possible, meaning we could only go in the future. And so and that's like a common thing that you'll see with a lot of scientists, is that they believe that if we're able to time travel, that it's maybe only forward physically possible to do it. Which would then explain, because like Stephen Hawking talks about, like, well, if time travel is possible, why don't we have an influx of tourists, time travel tourists now? Like,
Right.
Right.
wouldn't you, I mean, who knows? But like, you would think that if it was a common possible thing, that you would have visitors. Which, I mean, you could argue maybe we are, and maybe that's what some of the unexplained aerial phenomenon is, right? Like, that's a theory
Right.
too. That maybe that's that. But I didn't want to get too in the weeds about the possibilities scientifically and all of that stuff, because that's a lot, and it's not as fun as some of the other stories. So I have a couple of stories that I brought that are similar to what you talked about, Robin, with the workers that were moving things and they saw a house that when they went back the next day, it wasn't there. One, Mom, Joan, you brought to me, and it was about two journalists. One was a writer and one was a photographer. And they were sent by a newspaper to Hamburg, to a shipyard, and it was 1932. And while they were there, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, they were in the middle of an air raid. And so they were panicking and they were getting out of there as fast as they could. There's bombs going off and everything everywhere. And they snapped a few photos before they left. They got safely out. And when they developed the photos, they didn't see any of what they were seeing with their eyes. Then 11 years later, the journalist, his name was J. Bernard Hutton, and he opened the newspaper one morning, and it was 1943 at this point, and he read about Operation Gomorrah, and it was an air raid on Hamburg, and the images he was seeing were what he and his photographer friends saw that day in 1942. So that's a story that's, kind of very similar. There's another story, and I thought this one was really cool. This is a pilot. Let me pull up his name.
Was he in the Bermuda Triangle?
No, he was he was flying from Edinburgh, I believe, in Scotland. Let's see. I got it here. His name is Sir Robert Victor Goddard, and he was an air marshal, and he was flying from Edinburgh, Scotland to Andover, England. And while he was traveling, he went a route that went over Drem, Scotland, and he flew across a derelict airstrip. So this airstrip had been previously used, and then it had been kind of converted and was being used more for farmland at the time. So it was all grown up, and no airplanes, no workers there working the airfield. And he continued on, and as he was flying, he came into a big storm. It was like these strange yellowish clouds, he described it as, and he could only see the clouds, like he was enveloped in this storm. And his ship started to plummet, and as it plummeted, he broke through the clouds, and it was bright and sunny, and he saw the airstrip that he was still over the airstrip. And except for now, it was a bright sunny day, and the airstrip was fully functioning, and there were several planes. There were like employees walking around in jumpsuits, like blue jumpsuits, and some of the planes were painted yellow. And he's an air marshal. He did not recognize some of these planes, and like he couldn't recognize what type of plane they were. He ended up continuing on his flight, and the airplanes that he had seen that day were not even manufactured until 5 years later. And he ended up going back to the airstrip in Drem and years later, and he was seeing what he saw that day when he broke through the clouds in that strange storm that he experienced.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So cool. Also in let's see, I think that was 1935. Yeah, it was 1935. Interesting, because the other one was so close to that. The one that happened in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Makes you, or it made me wonder. I thought that was interesting. And after he came out of the storm and he saw the airstrip fully functioning, and he saw the yellow planes and people walking around the first time before he went back there years later, he ended up going back into the clouds again. It enveloped him again, and he popped out, and he was in Andover, which is where he was headed in the first place. So really interesting. Then I heard, do we want to talk about those stories first before I tell one more?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Is that another question?
You've got me spellbound. Keep going.
Okay, I'll keep going, and then we can talk more. But the other interesting time slip story that I heard was on a podcast called A Funny Feeling Podcast. We should be able to put all the links to all of these things that I'm talking about in the show notes, so you guys can look at them later.
Right.
But it's a really funny podcast. They tell ghost stories, and they just talk about paranormal things. So might be something that our listeners would be into. But there was a listener that called in. Her name was Becca, and she said she was home alone, and she was in a home. It was a newer built home, and she was by herself, and she was walking down the hall to go to her kitchen. And when she got to the kitchen, she stopped and was surprised to see someone standing at the sink doing dishes. And so she's like standing there like, what's going on? Who's this person doing dishes? And the woman that was standing at the sink turned and saw her. And so they're both having this moment looking at each other, like at both. She said she looked shocked, she was sure, and that the woman looked surprised and shocked to see her standing there. And then the woman disappeared. And when she did, Becca noticed that the kitchen around her shifted a little bit as well. So the wallpaper, when the woman was standing there, there was like wallpaper on the wall that had a print to it. And she was like, my walls are just painted, so they don't have a print in my kitchen. And the decoration and everything just kind of shifted slightly, and she noticed it as this woman disappeared and everything kind of went back to normal. And so I remember hearing this story. That episode came out in 2019, and I remember hearing it at the time, and it stuck in my head because I think that's so interesting. And she thought the same thing. She thought, well, maybe, I mean, this is a new home. So funny that you were like, I'm going to think about the past, because she actually says, I wonder if this is someone in the future that's going to live here, and we somehow overlapped, or you could talk about maybe a parallel dimension. But she had the thought, maybe it's someone who lives here in the future, and we just overlapped our time a little bit and saw each other and startled each other, which I think is very funny that they both.
And that the future person could be telling somebody, I saw a ghost.
Yes, exactly. Exactly
Yeah, right.
it. Who's the ghost there? You know?
Exactly.
So I love those stories, and they're all really interesting, and they all have very common threads. I feel like the people were just kind of going about their business, and then all of a sudden something happens. The other side of this, which Robin, you were talking about earlier, when you will hear about residual hauntings, and people are like, well, what is that? What is a residual haunting? And if you're not familiar, the theory is that a residual haunting is almost like the energy of a person has been recorded in that area. There's a theory called the stone tape theory that basically means just that they're analogous to tape recordings, right? So like if you think of energy being recorded kind of onto the ether of that area, and some theorize that maybe it's for things that are maybe something traumatic happened or very emotional happened in that moment or in that time, and it just stuck. I know, like, I have thought about, and we've talked about, that maybe it's not even something traumatic or very emotional or whatever, but maybe the mundane tasks that you do every day, right? Like, I get up and I go in the bathroom in the morning and I brush my teeth right in the morning. And maybe
Like an imprint.
Yeah.
You mean like yeah, okay.
It's just constant. It's that energy. And it's like replaying on a tape. So with a residual haunting, if you see this person walking through your room the same time every day, and you try to communicate and you try to use different tools to communicate with this entity, and it's never communicating, well, people would call that a residual haunting, people in the paranormal field, because that's the theory, right? That it is just a replay of something that happens so often, or something traumatic, or something with a big energy to it. But like Robin said, who's to say that we're not seeing a time slip? So one famous example I can give you of what is referred to as a residual haunting is at the Winchester Mystery House. I'm sure everybody on our panel has heard of the Winchester House. Famously supposed to be haunted. And one of the reports in that home is that there is a man that is seen, and they call him Clyde, and they see him pushing a wheelbarrow full of coal in the basement. And they also see him trying to repair the chimney in the fireplace in the ballroom. And to the point where people will come up to the employees and say, I love the actor that you have who's just in period clothing and he's working on the fireplace, you know, that's a cool like ambiance that you're creating. And they're like, we don't have any of that. Like, we don't have any actors acting things out today. So, you know, that begs the question, right? Are we seeing a replay, like on a tape, of that energy, like because maybe that's something he did over and over again, or maybe he really loved it there, or whatever reason, there was a big energy there, and we're just seeing that replay, or are we time slipping a little bit, and there's something about that area or that place,
And even the energy, that
yeah.
energy could reach through, you know, it could be so intense that it breaks whatever barrier there is between now and then. You know, this is just me, you know, going
Theorizing.
off on, but yeah, theorizing. But like
Yeah.
when I saw the Hessian soldier in the middle of the store in Flemington, when I
Yeah.
saw him there, I didn't think, oh, you know, it's a spirit of it. I thought, oh, I just saw somebody from a different time period, because he was standing behind me and I was actually in line, and then he was gone. And I thought, okay.
I think oftentimes that times of war we do see a lot of residual hauntings from then, because there's so much strife, there's so much grief, and it does make an imprint. And oftentimes, we were just talking about Gettysburg before the show, and I know that there's residual hauntings there. So yeah, I'm not surprised you would see a soldier just going about his business, his
Right.
regular
It's just
routine.
You know,
it's like
just talking tonight, I realized that something formulated for me. The time slips that I've read about and have heard about have all been like a one-time deal. It's not like people see it and everyone sees it over and over and over again. Okay, it's a pilot flying. Actually, I'd read about that pilot that you spoke about, Jesse, flying over a battlefield, and it's in a different time period that he's looking at. But he's flies over that again, and it's not there. It's it's the everyday thing. To me, that speaks of a time slip. That's a slip right there. I myself had a haunting when I was in my 20s, and it was what I consider residual. A woman in period clothing would float and literally float through my living room at the same time every day. And I could see her. She was a full blown apparition, except she didn't have any legs like below the calf length. So she was just floating through. And every day she'd come through the room and she'd stop and she'd turn and she'd smile. Every day, the same thing. I never tried to interact with her at that time. And, I've often wished that I had. But I really do think that's a really good example of a residual. And it was just something she did. She looked like she was a servant. And, I lived in this big house. I lived in part of the house. It had been made into apartments. And I'm from Boston, so it was really old. And there was an old carriage house and all kinds of stuff. But I think it was a parlor maid or something that every day she would come through. And of course, she'd stop and smile at the people she worked for. And I think that's a residual, whereas the time slips are a one-time deal, and not everybody sees it. But I really do think that, well, actually, I know that anybody that would be in my living room at that time would see that same thing that I was seeing, because I had made sure people would be there at the same time. So they would see it, and I would know that I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Am I crazy? I'm not crazy.
Want some pizza?
Yeah. And so just while we were talking about that, this is the first time I thought of that, but I think residual things, anyone can see it, and it happens frequently. And I think that is like a tape that's playing over and over and over again.
No,
That makes sense.
I had an experience that I thought, well, it was in the late 70s. It was early in our marriage. I was going to work. We lived in the western suburbs of Chicago. There was a kind of a snowstorm. I mean, it was like 10 inches or something like that, 8 to 10 inches it was kind of not a huge snowstorm, but it was enough that cars were having trouble, and it was fresh snow, so the plows hadn't been out or anything yet. But I was driving to work, and I was coming out of our complex, our apartment complex, and there was a had to be in the mid 1940s vehicle, black car, and a man was out looking at the back of his car. It was snowing like crazy, and I stopped and I got out and I went over to him and I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "No, I'll be fine." And I went back and got in my car, and I looked over and it was all gone. Now, at that point, he hadn't had time to drive off, and I think he was kind of stuck. So at that point, and I remember we talked about it, I thought it was an angel. I interpreted it as him being an angel, and he was just, seeing if I was going to be, helpful. That's the way I was thinking at the time,
Right.
The more I think about that, I think that was a time slip.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah. And that would be a time slip, not a residual, because
Right.
it never happened again.
Didn't happen again. Right. So that was kind of a crazy deal.
I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking as we're talking tonight. I've never thought that before, but now just listening, there's a difference between the stories between a time slip
Mhm.
Right.
and what I consider residual. Residual hauntings, lots of people see the same thing all the time and report it. But there's no intelligent interaction with those entities. You'll talk to them and they won't answer you, and there'll be, just no communication between you, like there is with an entity who is not just residual, but is actually there. They communicate with you. And so that to me is a residual. And these other things we've been talking about are real time slips, which that's crazy to even think of, that there is such a thing as a time slip. But I believe that, it's very possible. Like the Hessian soldier that you saw, unless you were able to find that lots of people see him there all the time, then that could be a residual too.
Right.
But they'd be seeing him at the same place, and at the same time of day. So,
Do you remember, Robin, if he acknowledged you, like if he,
right.
or was it
He-
too quick, or?
No, he looked right at me. And I looked a little like shocked, and he smiled. Maybe because I had a stupid expression on my face. And then he was gone. But there was no interaction, like no talking, no.
Right.
It was very quick, but I was actually, like I said, I was waiting in line, and I had been talking to my friend who was in front of me, and I just turned around, and I was like eyes wide, like what? And then he just sort of like gave me a little, and then that was it. He was gone.
So he like disappeared while you were looking at him.
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like
You're
a
not
time
crazy.
slip or a residual.
Or a
That actually
It
sounds
sounds like a total hallucination.
no, it sounds like an actual spirit.
It does
Oh,
sound
okay.
like that experience that Becca had in her kitchen, though, where she
Oh, they did. They both saw each other.
both looked at each other. They both
You're
acknowledged
right.
each other and
Yep,
were
yep.
like, "What the heck?" And she
Yeah,
said
you're right.
she was solid. Like it was like
Right.
looking at you, standing in front of me. She's like, I could see her face. I could see her shirt. Like it wasn't like here's a fuzzy shape, and I think they were maybe doing dish. It was like there's a person standing in the kitchen.
Right. And this guy looked like he could have been anybody else in line, but clearly he wasn't.
Yeah.
But he looked
But
that
why didn't
clear.
he look shocked? I mean, he's seeing into
It was weird because he
future.
just was like, I was like, what am I looking at? And he was just like, like a little crooked, like, and
Well, if he was from the past, he's probably thinking, I had too much to drink.
yes, too much grog.
Wouldn't the kitchen story be really awesome if she was getting a glimpse of her future self washing dishes at that sink?
Ooh.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be
Well, it's funny
interesting.
you should say that because I was thinking about that with the guy with the old car.
Oh,
Although that was an
Thought it
old
was your
car,
future
so that
self.
would kind of screw that up. But maybe that was me because I was younger. I was a lot younger then. I was in the late 70s. Gosh, surprised I can remember it. But I was thinking, well, what if that was me when I was? No, I couldn't be. I wouldn't have a car that old. Ugh.
That would be truly like the most surprising thing about it all.
That would be. Yeah.
You had an old car. It was an old car in the 1970s. So now it would be.
Oh my gosh, it
An
would be
engine
dust.
car.
It would be dust.
And the guy was dressed in a pinstripe suit, and I believe he had dark skin.
Dad
Yeah.
does wear pinstripe suits every day. So you guys aren't.
He was an old guy. I know that. He had a long coat on. Oh well.
That's interesting though. And when you said the Hessian soldier thing, I had forgotten about that. And one of the other things that I found when I was looking into residual hauntings and like notable things like that, there's a place called the Daniel Benton Homestead. It's in Connecticut, in Tolland, and that's one of the reports there is Hessian soldiers, that people see them on the grounds. And it's a common thing, so that makes me think more of a residual.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
it feels residual to me.
Yeah.
I've recently had something happen, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm guessing it's a residual, but I was gifted a rocking chair from one of my students' families. And it was really exciting and special because it came from the college from where I'm from and from Penn State. And so I was very excited about it. And it belonged to a grandfather, and it was gifted to him by the university. And so it made it even more special for me. When he had passed, he had given it to his grandson, and they just can't keep it any longer. So they wanted to give it to someone who was also attached to that university. So it's in my living room, and 3 different occasions I have walked from the kitchen into the living room and seen someone in this chair. There's no there's no eye contact. There's nothing. In fact, this man is sitting very quietly and like staring at what is just our wall. There's nothing there, and rocking quietly in this chair. Now that I'm seeing this, I think in my mind's eye, maybe because the chair isn't actually rocking. It's just what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very, very clear to me. Once I told the story, it's not happened again, but I have seen it happen 3 times. And I have to wonder if it's a residual or if it's just my psychic impression of this man.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
It's just a little different.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
That's what
think.
I'm used to.
Because I think I told this story about seeing the guy from the corner of my eye at my vet's house.
Yeah.
But she had somebody that seemed more residual. I hadn't seen her, but she was talking about, she just repeatedly came down the stairs, and
Yes.
people saw her, not just her, but other people had seen her. Whereas
Right.
this guy kept looking at me and smiling. So he seemed more like he had some idea, unless that was residual too. And he was just smiling, and it didn't matter if I was there or not.
Right.
like the woman that Mom saw
Mhm.
going through the room,
Right.
turn and smile, but it didn't seem to matter. She wasn't like turning and looking at you every time and smiling, right?
It seemed to me like she was, but it wasn't. I think I just happened to be in the same place all the time. It was at a time when I would be sitting in there,
Yeah.
and she would come through and she would turn and
Look
look
in
in
the
my direction.
General direction.
Yeah, in my general direction. And so,
Which it makes you wonder if like where you were sitting and spending time was maybe where the people that she worked for, the family, sat and spent their time, and she was coming through, and that was a thing that happened frequently, and she would turn and
yeah.
Right. And like the guy in the chair, he could have been always smiling at somebody there at some point. And again, I wasn't the only one to see him. The person who owned the house, and she had a couple other people. And they always did the same thing, but maybe it was because somebody sat, almost like it activated it, him doing it. Somebody sat in the position where somebody, when he was alive, used to sit. And maybe that's what brought on this. And I'm going to assume it was this thing. He wasn't talking to me. He wasn't interacting with me. He was just like
Right, right,
smiling with a sweet, sweet smile on his
right,
face.
right. The same with the woman that I saw. She wasn't interacting with me at all.
Yeah, I've also heard this pretty often, and one specifically, I believe, was at the Whaley house, where they were doing like a ghost tour investigation. Kind of like what we've done at St. Augustine before, where you can pay to go, and they'll give you like EMF detectors or different devices, and you can walk around and do an investigation with people there. And they were doing that, and they would be in one room, and in the other room hear like a party, like a full party happen, like people talking and music and plates clanking and silverware and um, that sort of thing. And that's something I've heard multiple times from different locations. But I wonder, those things make you wonder too. What is that? Is that, and they would go into the next room and there's no one there, and they can't find the sound will stop, um, and it makes you wonder what's going on there. Is that some sort of residual thing, like a residual haunting, if you want to call it that, from it's just playing back events that happened there, or was that some kind of time slip? Whoop, like that just they just dropped in for a second to that, or for a
Right.
time.
Years ago, I was at my friend's house where she was living with her husband, and he wasn't there. There was nobody there. We were both sitting in the living room, and we heard plain as day, and we looked at each other and finally said, "Do you hear that?" There was somebody playing a guitar clearly in the room between us. I have no idea what that was. It was just sound, and it was somebody playing the guitar. And at first we were both just like, and then finally we both looked at each other and were like, "You hear that?" Because it was loud, like somebody was right there in the middle of the room. And I wonder, could that have been somebody who had lived there before? I don't know. Or was that just like, time
What
slip?
is that? Yeah.
What is that? What the heck was that?
This is why I wish that scientists would take all of this much more seriously and do some scientific investigation so that we could get some answers. I mean, we all want answers, That's why I like getting physical evidence when we do an investigation to back up
Yeah.
what we're hearing and seeing. I mean, because we don't know what's really happening, and it's fascinating. Something's happening. Lots and lots and lots of people have interactions with all of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
too many. I mean, sometimes I think people get caught up in certain things that they want or they expect or they would like to experience, but there are too many people who are very calm about studying the paranormal, and there are so many of them who have witnessed it. It's not just, you know, wishful thinking or
right.
something that's made up. It there are too many experiences, too many calm, intelligent, level-headed people.
Rational minded. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to just blow it off and say, "Ah, you're all nuts," no,
And I think often if people are asking about it, they will say, no, I've never had any experiences. And then as you kind of start talking about things, it's like, oh, well, there was this one time.
right,
I
right,
don't know what this was, right? I mean, I feel like I've heard that time and time again, right? Where
Yes.
people that say they don't have any kind of experiences at all, and then they will start talking, and as they start talking, they're like, "Oh, well, there was this one time when I saw this, light come into my room when I was a kid, or whatever it
right,
is."
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
Um,
it's true.
yeah, so
It's
some,
almost like they put it out of their head
Mhm.
yeah,
until they feel a little safer about talking about it. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I did have something happen. But
well, and it
yeah,
is funny because I think when you're a parent, right, and if your kid is like, "Hey, there's a little girl talking to me in my closet," you your instinct is to be like, it's fine. Like, oh, don't worry about it. Oh, like,
it's just your
like,
little imaginary friend.
right, you
Yeah.
know, or ghosts aren't real and all those things. Um, and because it can feel scary to be like, yeah, I don't have the answer to that. Like,
Right.
I don't know what to tell you it is, and I think so. I think a lot of people um, do that. So if their kid comes to them and says, I saw someone walking through my room, they want to dismiss it because they might not understand it. It might be scary for them too, or they want their kid to sleep.
Right.
Speaking as a parent who has been desperate for sleep before when my kid was in the middle of the night, um, you know,
Yeah. And you're right. Like they may be afraid of it themselves or don't know how to explain it to their child, or they're afraid their child will then be frightened.
yes. And then, or they think, I think a lot of people have been told that it's like that you are crazy if you
Yeah.
believe in that kind of thing or are open to that kind of thing, or you're woo woo, or you can't, that you're not a rational person if you're willing to be open to that kind of thing,
Right.
right? Or you're discounted if you say that you are open to those kinds of things. I think probably a lot of us have experienced that, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I saw things when I was a child all the time, and my parents constantly told me there's no such thing as ghosts. So I was like,
I
okay.
I was fortunate enough that so many family members had experienced something
Hmm.
that if you brought it up, they would listen. I didn't get shut down, so I was lucky. I mean, because
I
they
didn't
they either
either.
they either saw spirits or some paranormal occurrence, or they had premonitions, or all these things, so that when you said, "Hey, you know what happened?" They didn't say, "Shut up, that doesn't happen." They were like, "Oh, that happened to you? Okay," and they would talk about it. So that was good.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Yeah, I didn't get shut down either by my parents,
Right,
but
right.
but I,
Neither do
certainly,
our grandchildren get shut down, so that's good. They are all very open and free to be able to be experiencers, and it's okay. And they
But
do.
I have had the experience that I've known people that have said things like, "What is Area 51?" And I was like, "Whoa, you have had a very different life than I have had. This is shocking to me."
Well, what was funny though was when Obama admitted that there was an Area 51, and I think everybody in our family was all like, "What? People didn't know there was an Area 51?" Because we'd known about it for years and years and years, you know. But
Oh, that's so
yeah,
funny.
not all kids have been brought up like our kids and our grandchildren. We all went to Jessie and her husband and their kids, and Rob and I went to Sedona, which has a lot of vortexes there, you know, different energy fields. And that's a whole different thing we could talk about. And, you know, after a while, I no longer want to say, oh, I'm feeling something, because it happens to me so often. So I keep quiet. And my grandson was 7, Jesse's son was 7 at the time. And he was holding my hand and we were walking together. And he stopped, and I had just felt a really strong energy field. And he stops and he goes, "Whoa, are you feeling that, Gran? Are you feeling it?" I said, "Yes, I am." And Jesse turned around and said, "You are?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Oh." But yeah, it's great that they can be open to that and feel what they feel and see what they see, and not feel like they're going to be mocked or
Right.
told that they're crazy or that there's no such thing. But that's a whole different thing that I really don't. Well, I think maybe we can get into that a little bit on our next one. Is that type of thing, because that goes along with nature spirits. Because when we were there, the week before Adam and Jesse and the kids got there, we had been standing at the bottom of Bell Rock, and in this particular, what is a well-known vortex, and I heard a voice in my mind say, "Call forth the wind," which, even saying those words to you now, sounds to me wacky. It really does. Call forth. I don't call forth anything, you know. But I heard a voice say, "Call forth the wind." And it had been a very dry, still day.
And it was Dad, and he was like, "Go."
No, it wasn't dead.
Okay.
And so I did. I called the wind, and Dad and I were almost blown over with this wind that came at us, hit us, and went to the base of the Bell Rock, which is actually like a mountain, and went right into it. And I was just like, well, that was really very strange. And I don't know what that was, but I bet it was some kind of nature spirit, is what I'm thinking. Do you think so, Beth?
Yeah, that sounds like it was. Absolutely.
What the point of that was, I don't know. Just to open my mind to that or
Yes,
something?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but that is weird. That's a very strange thing to me.
So the other thing with the time slips, it's sometimes, you know, it's random locations like that. The other is that place in England, Bold Street in Liverpool.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a location where multiple people have described what
Walking
feels.
back in time.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
use it as a time slip. So interestingly, most of the things we've talked about, they saw the future, right? So like that pilot, he saw something that he then saw years later,
Mhm.
and planes that hadn't even been invented yet,
Mhm.
or manufactured yet, I should say. Um, Hutton and Brandt, the journalist and the photographer, that was an air raid. I mean, he believes that then happened 11 years later. But
Mhm.
what seems to happen on Bold Street is um, people experiencing going back in time.
Back in the past. Yeah.
One story was a man and his wife, they were shopping, and his wife went into a bookstore, and he went into another store. This was in the 90s. And um, he came out of the store that he had gone into to go back over to meet his wife at the bookstore. And when he did, the sign above the store said like Crips. And he was like, well, that's not, this looks wrong. Like things are wrong. They don't look the way they're supposed to. And he saw some policemen walking by, and they were wearing like the hats and the capes that the police wore in the early 1900s.
Mhm.
And he walked into the store, and it was like a woman's clothing store. And he was trying to go to the bookstore to meet his wife, and just everything looked like back in time, like nothing looked right. And so he was kind of panicking. And as he's walking to go back out, a woman comes walking towards him, and she is dressed in like 90s clothes, right? And so she walks in, and he is walking out. And as this is happening, everything shifts back. And all of a sudden, they're in a bookstore. And he grabbed her arm, the woman's arm, and he was like, "Did you just see that?" And she was like, yeah, like I walked in because I thought it was a clothing store, and now I'm in a bookstore. um, so that's really interesting too. Oh, then when he looked it up later, the police uniforms that he saw were the uniforms that they wore in 1910, and the store, Crips used to be in that building, years and years before, in the early 1900s. So that's a weird instance where he and another person experienced it, but his wife didn't experience it. She was in the bookstore, and she had been there the whole time and didn't know what he was talking about, right?
Wow.
But yeah,
But
that's
that's happened on that street to multiple people. I remember that now you bring it up. That's a very famous one. Huh.
yeah, multiple people report strange things like that happening on that road
On
in
that
Liverpool.
street. Yep.
What's
Yep.
I need to go there.
Yeah, I know. It's
Maybe there's a portal or something.
yeah, like a black hole or something.
Yeah.
Which is, what Einstein said you'd need to have. It would be like a black hole to travel.
Oh, well, yeah, which is why I was saying no pun intended about the wormhole, because that is something
Right.
that physicists are theorizing, that you could potentially use a wormhole for travel. And I
Right.
think Russian scientists right now are really trying to hone in on that and figure it out. But that the problem with wormhole is that you need dark matter to keep the opening open, and we can't figure out how to harness that. There's plenty of that in the universe, we know now, but they can't figure out how to use that to contain it and keep it open. And then you don't know where you're going. You're just jumping in, and the theory is that it would time travel, but without any kind of control. And this sounds crazy, and that is what the physicists are working on right now.
That is what physicists are working on right now.
That sounds
Exactly.
wild.
It does.
But that is what they're
Because
theorizing.
who knows where you would end up?
Yeah.
What a
We'll be back with the
risk.
dinosaurs.
Right. Or if the whole multiverse thing is feasible, then you could
Yeah.
end up somewhere else, or even just it could change your energy and you could be something else. That would just be bizarre.
Well, that makes me think of the Madeline L'Engle books, A Wrinkle in Time, and all of that.
Yes.
They travel
Yeah.
to different, like Mrs. Who's It, Mrs. What's It, like take them into
Yeah.
different dimensions. And there's one they go to where they're completely flat, and yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I love the way that was written because you actually, usually it's not a concept you can get, but when
Yeah.
you read that book, you're like, you
Oh,
can
yes.
imagine it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great books. Great books. Well,
Yeah.
we should probably close,
Before
right?
we have a time slip.
Oh, wait,
Whoa.
Oh, no.
There she is. Oh, she slipped. Oh. Well, our
After
next,
we close, though, I'd like the panel to stay and talk because
Sure.
we need to talk about Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, yeah. Our next show will be November 30th, the last Thursday in November. That's how you can remember that. At 7:30 p.m. And our subject will be nature spirits that we're going to be talking about. And does anyone else have any final comments, questions, answers, revelations?
No, I don't think
me.
so.
No?
good.
Nope.
I
We're
think we
good.
did a good, thorough discussion here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
all right. Thanks, Jesse, for all your research again.
Yeah.
Yes,
We
thanks.
do all appreciate it. So I guess until next time.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
See you
Thank
later.
you.